Hello, my name is Jon Witt, and this is a hip mobility class. Most of the class, or half of the class, will be standing, but you could use a wall to support yourself, and it's quite repetitive, so maybe you're not doing as much repetition as I'm doing, and that's quite all right. Just get used to it when you're learning something new. Doesn't have to be perfect, and you can just kind of make it your own. I'll give you descriptions, I'll outline like what it is and why we're doing it. But the wall will be great in terms of giving you support if you couldn't balance. You could even do it in shoes if you really had a hard time with your balance. And then as your balance improves, right, it's good to be barefoot because you'll just get more control in the feet, more stability in the feet. So if you like the classes, I'm happy that you've been enjoying them. If you're a subscriber, thank you. If you're not a subscriber to my YouTube channel, you could subscribe and then you'd be notified as far as when I would upload a new video. And you could always leave me a chat, right, in the messages as far as what it is that you're looking for, because I might not be offering a class or a tutorial that you actually really need. I'd be happy to make those videos if it's something that you really are looking for in terms of for your practice. So I'm going to start in a standing position. So when I'm standing, I'm going to time it. And the reason I use time as opposed to counting repetitions is that you can be a little bit more specific with the details of what you're doing. So with this type of hip mobility, if you're very weak in your hips, your hips will cramp. You'll get tired from the exercises, and that's why I say you can take breaks. But if you have good strength, think of the exercises as building more of a softening effect into the hips. And that's what you get from stretching or doing mobility work or doing yoga, right? That's part of it. But when you're, again, doing these exercises, think of a small range of motion, not like a really big range of motion at first, and then you can increase the range of motion, right? So I'm going to start on my dominant leg, but I'm going to be exercising my left leg. I'm right-handed dominant, so my left side it moves not as well, so that's why I always start on this side. Okay, so I'm taking my left leg up. My hips are squared. This could be the position, but what you're going to be doing is taking it up and out and around. So I'm going to do the first few, not slow, but slower than I typically do them. And the reason that if you're a little bit hard or kind of rigid in this, that's where you can get a little bit tight from it. So I'm moving over time, if I can, into a full range of motion. And you can notice that my hips aren't moving in space, right? I'm trying to keep my hips squared as best that I can. And then there'll be other versions that we do today that your pelvis will move in space. But if you're, some people will find it harder to do this variation, and others will find it more difficult to do the open type of mobility. But you're just breathing. It can be hard, right? But as you're here, I'm going to switch over just to give your leg a break. So as I'm lifting and rotating, the leg's moving behind me as I'm doing this. If you really want to get technical, you can have the bottom foot straight. If you really are working more on the balance component, the foot is straight. You'll notice with dancers and martial artists, when they're doing something really complex, the foot's usually turned out, right, for better balance. You could do that, to start with, but then over time, like I said, having the foot straight will be more challenging in terms of balance. And your leg, your bottom leg, you haven't done this before, probably will burn, right? It's going to be difficult. But doing these as we are builds up a lot of good stability in the lower body, and it'll really change the way that you change directions. These are so good for your hips. So now I'm on my right leg, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be moving in. So I'm going out, then in, right? So start slow if you need to, right? Maybe it's a static position, right? So when people have arthritis, in their pelvis, it may be better to hold static holds, and you can certainly do that. As you become more aware in your practice, you might start to see that you can start to add a motion, but maybe it's a partial range of motion as opposed to a full range of motion. But as you get used to it, you can really explore this greater range of motion, and like I said, really change the way that you walk, change directions. So good for your knees, like incredible for your knees. So breathing, switching over to the right leg, so it's moving back and forward. Again, hold the wall. And I've said this before, when you're moving into newfound places, it can be very, you'll get really hot from it. And like I said, maybe your repetition is like 5 or 10. But as you do this, I recommend doing this at least a couple times a week. You'll build up, more conditioning and stability, and it won't be so complex for yourself. So keep the body upright. Use your left foot as much as you need to. Try not to grip through the toes when balancing. I find that common with people, is that they're just kind of hanging on with their foot as opposed to really learning how to balance. So that's different. So I'm taking my leg up, but I'm going to have a more loose pelvis. So notice how my pelvis is moving as my leg is lifting. So my pelvis is moving in the direction of my leg. And I think for people this is a little bit easier, but if you're very tight, you really don't have the option. The pelvis will probably just kind of stay locked in place. Again, move at your own speed. So if you find I'm moving too fast for you, it's not about keeping up. It's just, I've been doing these for a while, and this is the speed that I like. And there are days that I move slower. There's days that I move quicker. So on the left foot now, taking the right leg up and moving the pelvis. So you can see how my pelvis is turning as I'm moving the leg. And when you get up out of a chair, you want to be moving from the hip. You're not moving from the hip, you're moving from the knee. And that's why your knee might start to get really beat up just from that small motion of changing directions. Going in, so out and around. Again, open pelvis. So your upper body can move as much as it needs to. So the further my leg moves out, you may notice that your body has to lean to the right more to keep your balance, and that's okay. But with the closed hip position, we were keeping everything in a singular line. So it's a little bit more specific in adjusting the hips. Again, your leg will probably cramp up. You take a break. When you're ready, you go back into this. But this will be 10 minutes of practice. And if you really want to change something, sometimes it is about repetition. Like doing many repetitions will be necessary to really regain your motor skills again. a few times is good. It's better than not doing it at all. But to really get the tissues to respond and for you to understand how to move the leg more freely in space, it'll take most likely lots and lots of practice, which is good, I mean, it gives you something, right? Say you're an avid yoga practitioner, or you can find other really good ways to help your practice. So moving it in. Sorry about that. So bringing it forward. Again, open pelvis, really loose. And we're this is the last of the sides, and then we'll do some free movement where you can move your leg however you want to. So now I'm on my right foot, and my left leg is up, and I'm moving my left leg however much, or how I like to move my leg. So it could be just forward, it could be back, you can move in a figure 8. That's what I'm doing. So I'm moving through space. Again, use your arms as much as you need to for balance. But then as you're moving the leg around, you can kind of feel like different ranges or angles that make it difficult for you to move your leg in space. Like a simple walking motion, it's very difficult for people, but if you can keep the pelvis loose and strong, right, it'll move more fluidly for yourself. So moving it around, forward, out to the side. You could cross it over behind you, right? There's no rule in that. Then I'm opening up, pelvis is open, right leg is moving, and it looks strange. Of course it looks strange. So anything that I do strange, I usually do it in my apartment. My neighbors may see me. I'm okay with that. But then as you get more comfortable, you can do it anywhere. Like these types of practices, I love doing it outside. It's just so easy to do. And again, I would do it barefoot. And if barefoot's too much for you, get a really thin shoe, like no heel, right? I'm fully going to barefoot shoes. I've known it for a while that it would be good for me, but all my shoes now are minimalist shoes. But I wouldn't start that way. I'd start with just a bigger shoe, and then the right leg is down. So just take a few breaths here, breathing in, breathing out, and then as you're standing, just kind of notice the difference in your legs and your feet. We're at the end of the class, or the next portion of the class is going to be on the ground. So if you need more padding, you could flip your mat. So I'm just going to sit as I am, but just in an easy crouch position. So I'm just having my arms around my legs. I'm going to look over my right shoulder. I'm going to look over my left. Often people will say, hey, well, I need to do cardio. I have nothing against, cardio, but you really don't need a machine. You just need to move your body eclectically, and you can get your heart rate going. So I'm going to look up. I say that because I'm out of breath. So you can lift the chin, lift the chest, right? And then looking forward, and then I'm going to have my hands beside me, and I'm just going to be moving my legs to the right side, and I'm just in this basic 90-90, or some people call it shin box. You can elevate the back knee, right? And you could be leaning to your side. So if you're very tight in your hips, you'll probably have to be off to the side as opposed to being straight up and down. And I advertise this class as learning to be on the floor again, or floor culture, I called it. And I think that's a big part of what's missing in yoga, is that there's really not a lot of seated positions anymore. Unless you're doing a yin practice, or if you're doing like a classical practice, there is some of it. But just in contemporary yoga, there's really not enough of it. So getting on the floor and just sitting is incredibly healthy for your lower body. So I'm going to take my knees up. I'm going to bring my knees over to the left side. And then as I'm sitting here, you may not realize why you're doing it, right? You might not have the awareness. And two, you might be like, well, this is doing nothing for me. But it's very good maintenance of the hips. So what really starts to become more problematic for people as they age is the interior of the hip, the pelvis. So that starts to calcify, and usually when it's really bad, that's when people obviously get a hip replacement or whatever, there's nothing wrong with that. But you want to maintain it before that day ever comes, and that's why there's not a day that I don't do this type of practice. Like I'm on the ground often throughout the day. So I'm going to take the knees up, and then as I take the knees up, I'm just going to be in an easy position where my left leg is in front of my right. I could hold onto my arms, and I'm just sitting. And you could certainly sit on a higher surface. You don't have to sit as low as I am. But the tissues, why it can be really hard on the knees and hard on the hips is because the tissues are just so hardened, right? They're just so tight. And you may have actually pre-existing stuff in your knees or your hips or your ankles. But as the tissues soften, they'll move as they should. And then you'll be able to have, not such a hard time standing or walking. If you really don't like walking, what I offer today is a good starting point, and that might be too much for you, so you do half of it, right? And then you just keep building upon that. So I'm going to switch the legs. So my left leg is in, and my right leg is in front of my left, and you'll see these different nuances in the hips, right? You'll see how you sit differently from side to side. When you get down on the ground and you sit, you'll notice that you typically will always sit the same way, right? But if you change it, because there's always a different, even crossing the legs, you change the cross of the legs, that changes everything. So just kind of see what your habits are and work on more of your deficiencies, and you'll be better off from it. You're breathing in and out. I could certainly be more technical, but it's also nice to just sit. When I'm giving as much information as I am, it's to make the practice a little bit more informative for one, but also for the time to go quicker, right? That's what I use in terms of teaching, so that if I just sat here quiet, that could be too much for people. People need more stimulus, especially in these times, right? But I'm going to stretch my left leg forward, and then my right leg is in. Just a classic yoga pose, half Baddha Konasana, Janu Shirshasana. And your left leg, it could be elevated where the knee is elevated. And I'm just, if you have a tendency to slouch, sit up, right? You have a history of lower back pain. Most likely it comes from slouching. That's common. Sometimes it does come from overextending, but often it's people's sacrum sit. It's a medical term. People just slouch into the sacroiliac joint, and it's really hard on the lower back. So take a couple deep breaths, nice and tall. And then I'm going to stretch my right leg forward and my left leg in. And I've said this before in classes, if you're very tight, move more. Don't hold the positions as long as I am. I'm holding them a little bit longer just because we move so much on our feet. But I like the idea for people that are very tight in their feet and their lower body to not sit as long, because it's just too much. But as you make it, as you move more frequently, it makes it easier, and you'll get more repetition in, and you'll be able to just have more capacity in holding things longer. So I'm gonna have my legs back up, and we're just gonna move a little bit into my shoulders, just for posture's sake, as my shoulders are back. I like the idea that we weren't on our hands today, because not everybody can do that. I am on my hands, but you could be on your fist. So I'm pulling shoulders back, and then I'm gonna relax that. I'm gonna pull back again. I'm gonna relax, draw it back, right? Let it relax, pull it back, and then I'm gonna sit where my arms are around my legs. I'm gonna push my knees out into my arms, right? Nice and tall. I can look up again. Take a few deep breaths here. And then just for the sake of posture, and because you can see it from the side, is I'm taking my left leg in, and I'm gonna try to get my knee and my armpit together. So if you can't, this is really difficult for you, it probably looks something like this, which is a good start. But if you can, from time to time, pull it back where the armpit and the knee is together. And I'm not gonna hold this really long, but good for your hands, good for your arms, retracting shoulders. You may need a wider stance with your leg because of discomfort in your pelvis. So take 2 deep breaths. Very good for posture, spine. And then bringing the left leg down, just so you can see. I'm gonna switch sides. So my right leg is in. I'm pulling my right leg back in space. Right, trying to get the armpit and the knee together. And like, for someone that is here, right, it's good, but you'll most likely need more leverage. So not the whole time, but you could try a little bit. Try to get it in more, but don't do that the whole time, right? Just try a bit, and then just make it more relaxed. Because you'll really need more leverage. For those of you that are tighter, you're gonna need more assistance, right? So take a couple deep breaths, and then bringing that foot down, and then I'm gonna have my feet wide again. And with my feet wide, I'm gonna move a little bit more. So I'm moving my knees to the right, I'm lifting them up, I'm going to the left, I'm bringing them up, going to the right, and just kind of see, maybe not full range of motion is better, right? I wish it was just that simple, go full range. But from what we did on our feet, this should be a lot easier for those of you that struggle with something like this. So just a few more times. So one more time to the right, and then over to the left, and I'm just sitting upright. So just move the right hip forward in space and pull it back. So what I'm going to do next might not be something that you can do, but these are good. So I'm moving the right hip forward, and then I'm pulling it back. I'm moving it forward and pulling it back. And you'll notice it's a little bit easier to sit with both hips down. And it's okay if that never happens, but I'm going to bring weight into my left hand, into my left hip. You'll notice that the right leg is lighter, and then I can bring it forward in space, and I can bring it back. And kind of like what we did earlier in class, where we did many repetitions, with something like this, you may want to just start with like 5 or 10 or 20, something like that. But just set a timer, for a minute, you're just moving the leg forward and you're moving it back. But it'll teach internal and external rotation, which we did up standing, a little bit different on the ground though. So I'm going to move it forward one more time. I'm going to move it back. You could eventually do it without the hands. So I'm going to bring my hands down and then lifting my right knee up and pushing my legs apart just for a few seconds and driving my knees apart. I'm nice and upright through the upper body. And then I'm just going to let that relax a little bit so my knees are a little bit higher. So if I'm pushing out and it's bringing discomfort into my hips or my knees, don't push out so much. But if it's okay, you're just pushing out to the level that you feel is appropriate. So I'm going to take the left knee forward on the inside of my right foot, and I'm sitting upright. So you could have your hand on your hip to guide the left hip forward, and then to move it back in space. So forward and back, forward and back. And you could continue with that if you're not bringing the back leg forward. So I bring weight into my right side now to bring my left leg forward. Sitting, bringing weight into the right hip, moving the left leg back, bringing it forward, back. And again, what I was, my earlier thought about repetition is that, again, people do it 5 times, 10 times, but you'll really need to do more of it, really to get, like, again, what you might be looking for. If you're just using it as a warm-up, that's, a low repetition is okay. But if you're really trying to get more intricate in how you move, the repetition really has a lot of value, right? But one more time, I'm going to bring it back. Left foot sits on the inside of my right foot. You can move more weight in my left hip. And then I'm taking my left knee up one more time. I'm pushing my knees apart, driving my legs apart. And then I'm just going to sit in a cross-legged position. So in sitting cross-legged, I use this often. You could certainly be up against the wall if you really want to open up through the upper body. But I'm going to go out to my left side. And then as I go out to my left, my body's leaning forward in space. My right arm could be up on a chair. It's really nice. So say keeping your arm up actually irritates your neck. You could have it on a higher surface. It could be up on a wall. But I'm letting my head rest to my left shoulder. And I'm exploring moving forward in space. I could explore going back. I say this often when I do this pose. There's many angles that I could really spend more time on, right? I'm going to bring myself up. I'm going to recross the legs. And then I'm going to take my right hand to the right, my left hand to the left, and I'm moving in angles that actually help me more, as opposed to look better, right? When you see a book or you see an ad or you see a post, whether it be Instagram or Facebook, right? You're looking at, usually you're looking at better aesthetics, but what you want to find is better angles that actually help, soften the tissues, allow your body to, not be as uncomfortable in simple positions like sitting or standing, right? Or walking. So I'm moving it back in space. You'll notice you'll get lower on one side. This is much easier for me to get lower on the side than the other. And then I'm going to come up and I'm going to recross the legs and I'm going to go over to the left side again. So go over to the left as you move out. It can be moving the whole time, you don't have to be static. But if I want more leverage in my body, I'm going to come down on my elbow and then I'm going to come up. And say you can't get your elbow down, you could fold up like a towel or something lower than a block. Say a block is a perfect height, then you use a block. But I'm coming up, and I'm coming down, and I could even do it at a different angle, right? There's so many different ways you could do this. So I'm going to recross the legs. I have a timer here. Sorry. So you can recross the legs. So my right leg is around. I'm going to walk over to the right side. Left arm is out to the left. And then I could bring my elbow down at any, different angle, right? To, again, get into my back or my hip more. But maybe it's better to be up. Say higher is better today. Then you're up high. I like giving lots and lots of tips so that you have some sort of an outlet. Because if I just said you have to do it this one way, it might not actually be the best option for you. So then I'm coming up. So I'm just going to sit. I'm going to recross the legs. And then as I'm sitting, I could be trying to literally pick myself up more in space. Whatever wall you're looking at, just think about if it's, just think of turning to your right, not your head, but your torso. And then think of turning your torso to the left. So whichever way your torso turns more easily to, you're probably already turned over that direction. So it's subtle, right? But for me, turning to my right is really where I need to be moving. Like, it's much more difficult for me to twist in this direction. All right, so I hope that class was good for you. You can leave a comment. You could, again, ask me any questions that you may have. You could also send me a video if you're really struggling with something, and I'd be happy to help you. If you've been benefiting from these classes, please share. That helps me help more people. Everybody's teaching online these days, and I love that because there's more outlets for people to actually get healthy more than ever. But I think what I'm offering is special and unique, and I know that I can help a lot of different people. So it's just a matter of you helping me find those people. So if someone's really having a hard time, I'd love to help them more. All right, have a wonderful weekend. Take care, and hopefully I'll have you in class soon.